I call Sue Williams, CO.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I want to just simply say that was a very disappointing, and in fact it was a pathetic contribution, and the fact that she didn't understand the arguments that we are presenting about why this bill is being opposed by the opposition tells the country a lot about why this bill is flawed and why this bill should be rejected. As I listen also to the Minister speak, I'm reminded that this is a Minister who is an example of somebody who once upon a time was able to be receiving the domestic purposes benefit, and through the support of taxpayers was able to raise herself and get an education through the support of taxpayers. And she's managed to raise herself through the ranks of the National Party. And one would think that now earning over $200,000 a year, and with the power to make change and effect positive change and help others who are in need, that you would think that this minister would reach out and give a hand up to the many other mothers who are out there, the many other people who are struggling and suffering. But instead, disappointingly, she's introducing this particular bill, which is really a kick in the guts for beneficiaries. And that is the disappointing matter for me with regard to this minister and the bill that she's introduced into the House. And she herself has said that beneficiaries need a kick in the guts. Or a kick in the pants. Mr. Speaker, in 2008, when I won the election, the local media, Manukau Courier, came up and asked me what did I think was now going to happen with the National Party in power. And I responded that I thought people were gravitating to Mr. Key, thought that he was to give him an opportunity, thought he had a good smile and was genuine. But I said, in the end, when we see this government's policies, we will then be able to identify once and for all that this is a national government no different from a national government of the 1990s. And that under this government and under Mr. Key, we are going to have to fight in Māngere, we are going to have to fight in Manukau to protect the things that are valuable to our community. And one of the things that the previous speaker did not understand is that Labour values the work of parenthood. Labour values the raising of children. And those aren't necessarily paid jobs, but they are important jobs if we are going to build a strong nation going forward. And they are important jobs if we want to ensure that all our kids, doesn't matter who the parents are, but all our kids are given every opportunity to be able to stand and pick themselves up. And the only way that we can do that, sir, is by ensuring that we have policy in place that encourages and supports education. And one of the fundamental principles, Mr. Speaker, of policy development, if you want more of something, you encourage it, you support it, you fund it. One has to fund it, one has to support it, and the parties have to encourage it. And so when we look at what this government has done thus far in the cutting of adult and community education, what does that say? That means they do not want the community to be able to lift themselves and to be able to receive that kind of education and skill development. When we see this government cut funding going into early childhood education centres, what does that mean? It means that this government is saying they do not want to see our children getting those opportunities, the same opportunities that the minister once upon a time received for her and her family at the expense of the taxpayer. And that's a disappointing thing, Mr. Speaker, that We are having to fight for the things which once upon a time others like herself has received, but now in a position of power and in a position of influence, that minister is unable to do the right thing by helping those in need. And so we've seen, sir, what this government has done, and I want to say that the similar thing with this bill. This bill says it is to try, what's this, the wording? Relenting focus on getting people into jobs. And the reality, sir, is that this bill is about forcing, coercing, bullying beneficiaries to find jobs. And I have to ask, where are those jobs? With almost 160,000 people unemployed, the highest at 16% for Māori and 14% for Pacific, we want to ask this government, what are you doing to create jobs? If you're going to have this unrelenting focus on getting beneficiaries into jobs, then we want to make sure that those jobs are available. Because if these beneficiaries are going to be punished for not getting into a job and having their benefits reduced or cut by 50% and ultimately by the 100%, what then happens to them, Mr. Speaker? Do they then spend the rest of their life on the streets begging? Is that what we want to see? Is that what we're trying to build here? That the masses are on the street as beggars while the select few control all the assets and the income of this country? And I say this bill is threatening beneficiaries. And debate is good, but debate is good if the government is listening. Debate is good if the government is listening. Overwhelmingly, the submitters to this bill, sir, oppose this bill. They oppose it, saying that the assumptions that this government is working on is flawed, and the assumptions in particular about dependency. The Associate Professor, Mr. M.A. O'Brien, said, the bill is flawed in every sense and should be withdrawn. He further says, there is no evidence for the gross and obscene assumptions of dependency. The government was making things up, saying that there are significant numbers of dependent families and generational dependent families. And the Associate Professor O'Brien says, these assumptions are flawed in every sense and should be withdrawn. Another submitter, Waitakere Community Law Services, said, the government's bill assumes that women choose to be on the domestic purposes benefit. Women don't choose to be abandoned by their husband or partner. Women don't choose to be bashed in by a drunken husband and then left alone to fend for herself and kids. A woman doesn't choose when a husband cheats on her and then abandons her and the children. And so this professor is saying that the assumptions made by this government in defending their bill is wrong. The Waitakere Community Law Services says the government assumes people choose and want to be on a sickness benefit. Well, that's wrong. One does not choose one day to go out and find a drunken driver to run over their legs so that they can get on a sickness benefit. One doesn't choose to have rheumatic fever. One doesn't choose to have leukemia or have a stroke, sir. These are people who are sick and destitute, resulting from no fault of their own. And Dr. Huhana Hiki of the Auckland Disability Law says she gave strong evidence opposing the government's bill as it will harm disabled people. She said this bill contravenes the United Nations rights of disability, the right of disabled people to live well, the right of disabled people or any people, the right not to be poor. And I would say, Mr. Speaker, that this bill, according to the overwhelming evidence of submitters, is going to drive families into poverty.
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member, but the time has come for me to leave the chair. This debate is interrupted. I shall resume the chair at 7:30.